Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and as usual, I'm hanging out with this nerd, Nerder Doug. I guess we can say that now, right? On
Sure.
every third airing of these, it's as usual.
We're always usually hanging out with some nerd or another.
It's true. It's true.
Oh, I can hear you. Mute. Sorry.
I
had to mute it too. You couldn't hear.
Yeah. That's terrible. Having to hear us twice.
Yes.
So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different that we don't really do too often, or we haven't in a while. I mean, there was a time when it happened much, much more often, but we're actually going to talk about a different role-playing game. I know, right? Shudder the thought. Just because, why not? We've kind of been on this kick and been talking about the Cortex system, and we've been curious about it. And one of the things that really kind of interested me was the fact that Fandom had acquired Cortex, and Phantom also had acquired D&D Beyond, and I knew Adam Bradford was going to be in charge of it. And we've been dealing with him for several years now. We have a lot of confidence in what he does, so I'm very intrigued to see what he does with the Cortex system. So there was a Kickstarter. It was funded. I don't know that everyone has received our books yet or not, or maybe they did, but I think the project was kind of somewhat shelved, and then it got scooped up, and now the team from D&D Beyond is going to do something with Cortex, or maybe they'll even have a brand new team. I just know that Adam is going to be in charge of it. So we know there's going to be a digital tool set similar to D&D Beyond for it, because when we had Adam on here, we ended up talking a lot about Cortex and what they're planning to do with it. So we can circle back to that, but the Cortex system itself, the other thing that I thought was really cool and excited me when I found out that D&D Beyond had acquired them, is that there's Cortex and Cortex Plus, which I didn't actually know that. I had to do a little bit of research. But Cortex had a lot of properties that they had licenses for. They had Serenity, Battlestar Galactica, Demon Hunters, and Supernatural. Pretty impressive. But then you look at Cortex Plus, and this is the thing that actually kind of confused me a little bit, because I was I thought they had more, but it's because there's a split between Cortex Plus and Cortex. You had the Smallville role-playing game, Leverage, Marvel Heroic role-playing game, Dragon Brigade, have no idea what that was, and then also another Firefly game, and I believe that all came about from the publisher Margaret Weiss Productions, and then Cam Banks is the actual designer. So after you start digging, I find it kind of interesting, to look at the lineage and stuff like that. Now we're starting to dig into the game. We may or may not do videos on it in the future. Depending on how much we like the game, right, is what it's going to come down to. So we started reading it. So far, I like what I'm reading. It is a dice pool system that is fueled and relies heavily on bennies. Is my overview of the game. It's also very customizable. The dice pool is a little bit different than some of the other games I've seen that use dice pools, but it does kind of still have some of the same problems all dice pool games have, with a little more flexibility on the DM side. The problem with dice pool systems is a lot of times they incorporate some kind of botch, or in this case a hitch system, if you roll poorly, if you roll ones, right? In this case, you actually get both, to be honest with you. But anytime you have it where you get a dice pool, and if a specific number comes up or something comes up that roll, and you roll poorly, the bigger the pool, the more likely you are to get those, right? So that's one of the downsides to dice pools, in my opinion. Here you have a little bit more flexibility as the GM, but depending on the GMing style, that's going to be a huge factor. So when you try to do something, you build a pool, right? And it's using die 4s all the way up to the die 12. So I like that. That's kind of fun. The more things you have to use, or things that you can kind of justify, let you build that pool out, and you get to add more dice. You only ever use 2 of the dice. right? And you're going to add those together. Well, the GM on the other side of the table, or it could be a player, really, builds a dice pool too, and they're going to kind of set your difficulty. But when they roll, and they're going to pick the two highest dice the same as you, add those together, that's your difficulty. Generally, like, someone will set the difficulty, and then the other person rolls against it. So the instigator, I believe, generally rolls first.
I don't remember. There was it was explicit of who, would roll first, and I think you're right. I think it's the
yeah.
No, you know what? It might not be, because I think it's like if a player initiates an action, which is a contest, then the game moderator rolls first because they're setting the DC for the I think.
But there's no like initiative system like D&D or other games. It's like when you want to do something, you just kind of do it.
Yeah.
And then, like, I guess, like, if a bunch of people are trying to do something at the same time, I feel like it would all happen at the same time. But then, you would just, arbitrate it, as it goes. So, the bonus to this system, though, as far as when you roll one, it's called a hitch. So you might still do well. You still may pass the task that you're doing. But at that point, the GM can be like, here's a benefit I'm going to give you, but you've acquired one or more hitches. So they could do something to that roll based off of those hitches, or they could hold on to it and do something to you in the future. You can decline it, but that doesn't really do anything for you. All it just means is the Benny goes from you getting it, I believe, to going to the pool that gets it. There's definitely things that do that, because I see you nodding your head, because I was just reading them. But it might not be everything across the board. Like I said, we're like going through the system and kind of learning it now.
Yeah, so I was to say, I took a different approach than you. I don't really have an overview, because I was like, I am going to sit down. I'm preface this by saying I'm terrible at learning new games, like, on my own. Like, I'm envious of people that just sit down with a book and they're like 3 hours later, like, I have mastered this game. I understand all this. That's not me. So I took a more like plotting approach to it, and I was like, I want to like absorb this game. I was like looking at the cover for a long time and the design and layout and stuff. I'm a geek for that, which it is very well done. But when you were talking about like the lineage of it and stuff too, not only if you look at the teams of those, on the credits page, there is a ton of really like innovative game designers throughout all these different things. So that's pretty exciting. And then the team for this book, and like you said, I believe it was like mostly done. And I don't know all the things that went on with Kickstarter, but like Fandom sort of like acquired it and like finished up the production. And I believe the physical books are supposed to be delivered in September. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. But so, and then seeing like this pretty big team, for this edition on there of all sorts of different artists and designers and everything. And then, like you'd said, under Adam's leadership, which, everybody, I mean, that's sort of like his thing, right? Like I even briefly emailed the Cam Banks to see about getting him on the live chat, and like, I mean, just his ability to like recognize talent and put together teams and market things is pretty exciting. So I'm really curious about that. But I was telling you before we got on here, I was like reading each page like out loud to myself. Like I really want to understand this, because like I said, I'm really terrible at learning new games. So it seems pretty easy to me, and that's a good sign, because I often I'm like, I have no idea what this game is, but I'm picking it up, and I was happy to see, at first it was that dice pool, and I was like, that's kind of intimidating, but it's pretty easy to understand. It's just using the regular polyhedral dice that and of course, I'm sure once you get into all the modifications to the game with like superpowers or whatever sets you decide to add to your game,
well, that's
those things change. Of like, well, now this roll is affected by this, ability and stuff like that.
That's one of the interesting things about the game. It's generic, and it's a narrative.
Super generic.
It's a narrative based game, but every time you go to play, essentially, you have to build the game you're going to play. There's like, it's not like if you're playing D&D, these are your set stats.
Right.
You have different categories of stats that you can use depending on what kind of feel you're going for a game. You know, you might have 6 or 7 stats, or you might have, you might just have mind, mind, body, and spirit might be your stats, right? And then you would have like other attributes that you use. You might have skills, right? Individual skills that or it might be broader. It might be a skill set like, I'm a Navy SEAL would be like your skill set, or I'm a police detective might be another one.
Yeah. Even the specific section, like they're called special effects, SFX, but they're basically like superpowers and things like that. So you can sort of mod those together where it's like, okay, I think the example they use is like a visitor from another dimension, basically like Superman. And it's just like, well, if you want to recreate this, here's like a little bucket of like, that's what would represent that. It's like super durability, super stamina. But, aside from all that, honestly, what hooked me was just the one-page core of Cortex thing. Because if you strip all that away, all the mods and all that stuff, you could literally play a game, and I'll use the example they have here, where like a simple character, it's like Jane Default. Her trait is she's a seasoned journalist, and that's it. And it's just like, to your point about it being a narrative thing, it's like, well, say Jane Default needs to finish a story by deadline in the morning. Well, she's a seasoned journalist, so she would have, that would not be a hard thing for her to do. So her pool is bigger because her trait, everybody would generally agree relates to the thing that the player wants to do. Whereas like if Jane Default had to pick up an Uzi and defend the newsroom from terrorists, probably is not going to be, she's not going to have a great role for that. So, really, just with that one page, you could basically, that is the game right there, just one page. It's like, it tells you how to make all the rolls and all that sort of thing at the most basic level. So I was thinking, just say you wanted to play a fantasy game like that, and your base trait's just like knight, So it's like, well, if you get in a fight, it's like, I want to hit it with my sword. Probably something a knight would do. I want to, backflip onto a, whatever, beanpole or something and, jump on this guy. It's not, so you wouldn't get a bonus to that. So I like that aspect. It's very simple and stripped down. And they really have the benefit, we talked about this before, of all the sorts of things that people want out of a game or like in a game, and sort of building on that.
It does feel a little bit like Fate and Cypher System in that regards, where you kind of have these defining traits that are very simple. Like Cypher System is, I think it's like a noun. It's like an adjective, noun that verbs is basically how the characters break down. And this has kind of a feel like that. Now I would say this is a system that could be as simple or as complex as you want it to be, because there's so many different mods that you could add on to it, and that's all. That's what most of the book is. It's just different modifications to the game.
Is it? Like I said, I'm reading super slow, so I'm just every sentence what does that mean? What is a test? What does GMC mean again? Just drill it into my brain. I probably said in my mind so many times, a test is a GM initiated thing, and a contest is a player initiated action.
Yeah, so I'm starting to read through it, and I think I'm a third of the way through, and I'm starting to get an overview of it. But then I'm gonna have to go back and go slower and figure it out, because I definitely want to play a couple games before we shoot some videos on it, sure. and see how it plays. Because I feel like it's going to read far more complex than it plays.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, back to, the book itself, it's just a nice looking book. I like the writing is really good and clear, and it's got a lot of different art. And because it's sort of I don't know, maybe you know more about, I remember quite a few games from, my life. But I've played several generic systems, but I don't think I've ever seen a game where the actual stats and stuff are generic. You know what I mean?
No, yeah.
You were saying
they're interchangeable. It's it's a lot different.
So it seems like it's a lot easier to get the kind of stories and sessions that you want that way, because it's like, well, if you're playing, like a police procedural, like a detective story, it's like, well, you're gonna, probably the same stats that would serve, fantasy adventures is not gonna be the same. So you can kind of muddle around with it that way. It's like maybe the skills you have just are those things, your stats.
It definitely feels like with this game, I would want to do like a session 0, but instead of it, the typical session 0 I've done in the past, it would be like we'd actually probably be building the game we're going to play.
Yeah. So like, hey, let's use something that's near and dear to your heart. So and to be honest, mine as well is the galactic wrestling concept, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I was just telling my girlfriend the other day. I was like, man, YouTube's algorithm is so sensitive. It's like I watched one interview with Triple H, and it's like all my YouTube things. Like, you want to watch this greatest match of all time? And it's like, I just watched one thing, man.
Yeah. You got to go incognito.
So I was thinking about that. Yeah, right. With your idea for a wrestling game, it's like, well, in that situation, maybe your stats are mic promos, technical skills, and whatever, something else, or maybe just those two, like your wrestling and your mic skills. That's it.
Yeah, you have to put something in there as to whether you're a heel or not.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, you could just, so like you were saying that, it's exciting because every time you sit down to play, you can kind of quickly put your idea, or probably get as noodly as you want and take tremendous amounts of time if you so desired. But you could probably put together a game to just, if you wanted to play one time or try something out, and then maybe the next time you're like, hey, I thought, what if we did this and that instead? And it probably wouldn't affect your character so much if you were like, let's add this stat or whatever, because I think it would have made more sense to do that. That seems pretty cool. We were just talking before online. It's designed to be designed and hacked.
Yeah, the game itself is a hack. It's just and I guess I don't know if it was designed that way because they put so many licensed games to it.
I think it was, I don't know, but I want to say that it was designed for that purpose, to be a game that you could recreate the stories that you love in media on your tabletop. That's why there's so many of them.
Yeah, whether it's Supernatural, Firefly, or Marvel superheroes.
And I like how the game even considers that not even just as a design principle, but just the way people play these days, where it's things are described as scenes or your session or whatever. It's not because I was just writing an article today, and I know for sure this is not even close to that with the majority of people's experience, but thinking in terms of, hey, we're going to play a long-term campaign that goes the whole distance. It's it's probably not going to happen for me. It never has ever. So I have no reason to think that. So yeah, approaching the game like that, well, let's just play. It's everything's a pilot, right? It's well, if we like it, then we'll pick it up and play again. If not, you could still play the same game and system and just play a totally different game.
So I was curious. So I looked up online. It does not look like you can find them particularly cheap.
What?
The Marvel Heroic Basic game.
Oh.
Because now I'm curious about the predecessors.
Well, hey, I mean, for all we know, Fandom acquired their entire library, and they'll just launch their, Cortex Beyond with hey, here's a Marvel game and a Serenity game and a Leverage and Smallville and who knows.
That's not how licenses. That's not how licenses work. Generally, especially high, especially like Marvel or something like that. It'd be,
well, it's still the same. I mean, I guess it would expire if anything.
They expire. There's usually clauses.
It's still the same game.
There's usually clauses written in.
What was the Kickstarter for? Was it just a sort of revised?
It was a new edition, yeah.
Oh, it was a new. Okay, I was gonna say because this is a robust thing.
Yeah,
And I can tell by our audience today that everybody wanted to learn about this tonight with us, right?
What are you gonna do?
Hey, maybe because I didn't offer my customary greeting.
Is that what it? Oh, is
Yeah,
that what it is?
maybe. I usually start off with a "What's up, nerds?" Well, yeah, I don't know. Part of me is just excited because I mean, believe me, I love me the Dungeons and the Dragons, but it's like, well, it seems like a nice time to do a fresh, get in fresh with something new for me that that is put together by a bunch of people that we kind of know to some extent, and
What
try something new, try different kinds of games.
What kind of game are you interested in running?
Honestly, Mega Man.
Yeah.
I was talking to Stephen about this. I'm like, there's, I'm a huge Mega Man fan, of course, but there was one of the series for the Game Boy called Mega Man Battle Network. And it was like, you're a kid, and, it's sort of like a near future thing, but everybody had a little handheld device that they could engage with their net navi, because there was like a whole net world, and that's where Mega Man was yours. And it's like, that was where you did all the fighting and all that stuff. But in the regular world, you were just like a kid in school, and you had to manage that. So it wasn't like deadly dangerous. So it's kind of like Tales from the Loop in that way, where it's like, you're not going to get killed when you're a little 10-year-old kid. But I always thought it was cool. It sort of had like a trading card game quality, where you sort of like built your load out from Mega Man, and I just kind of was enchanted by that. And every time I've talked about that with anybody recently, I just keep thinking of that. So I'm like, well, I guess that's what I would do. But I also like wrestling.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, it's like I wouldn't mind trying like fantasy like this too. So like I could imagine, that might be fun, even if it had the trappings of the game that we're most familiar with, D&D. It'd just be a different sort of way to approach it, I guess.
So
I am always wary, though, of playing other games, I shouldn't say other games, other kinds of games or other genres for myself and other people that primarily play D&D, because it's like, man, it is so hard to get away from that, like, we're just going to fight everything and kill it and move on mentality, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, we're all guilty of it. It's just like you're not, some games, like if you tried that with like Call of Cthulhu, you're gonna die. Like you're gonna have a quick game.
I wouldn't say for the most part that the same way when people are like, how do we do this other genre or game with 5e, and I'm kind of like, well, I mean, they have that game, you could just go play it. I feel the same way about the fantasy genre. It's like, if I'm going to play fantasy, I'm probably just going to play D&D as opposed to play it in another game. Now, that being said, I'm probably missing out, because I'm sure there is a lot of fantastic RPGs out there that do fantasy, and they're going to do it in a different way. And same with this. You could kind of customize the design the way you wanted to do it. I know the age system has a fantasy setting, which is different. What is it, Zweihander? Zweihander is another one that's been, that I see a lot of people talking about recently as well.
It's so nuanced. This is kind of weird. I don't know. I'm sure you experience this too, and maybe I don't know how relatable it is, but it's like we just spend so much time thinking about games that it's like there's such little subtle dials between things to me, that it's like it's such a nuanced conversation, you know what I mean? Because it's like, well, like we've talked about this several times. Like I just did a second ago. Like D&D has that feel of like you're heroic, you're gonna beat the monsters and move on. But like recently, I was checking out Ironsworn, is I believe a Powered by the Apocalypse hack. And it's like that's sort of that more folklore game where it's like monsters are scary. Like,
have you played it by yourself yet?
That's why I started getting into it, because I was like, I just cannot keep my group together. It's like even when they're like, hey, let's play Tuesday or whatever. They just
do you know who made that?
I don't.
Matt Click's dad.
Oh, really? Is that his dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's his first like thing that he actually like published, I think. And it's funny because other people kept talking about it, and then I don't know how it came up when I had him on the show, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." I don't know why. I just find that really cool that like,
yeah, of course it's cool.
That he works in games, and his dad put out this game that several other people had mentioned to me. So apparently it's getting a lot of accolades and praise.
I just gave up. I was like, I can't. This group just can't. I have a lot of like I said, just like running a long-term campaign and all that. So it's like, hey, I'll take it what I can get, man. If this game's cool, I'll go for it.
That makes me think of the meme where the guy is driving up into his car to a prostitute, and it's like, how much the DM for 4 hours?
Yeah. So circling back to what got on that tangent about Cortex was like, I think the appeal to me is I like the idea of this game because how do I want to put this? I like D&D a lot, and I am one of those people that's like, you can just reflavor, reskin things, and play other settings. I mean, even like a Star Wars thing, it's like, I don't know, just say your sword is made of light. I mean, even if it still does slashing damage, it's like, what are you really going for? Do you want to be, do you want to just pretend you're a Jedi in a galaxy far, far away, or do you want some like mechanical reason why like this, energy thing is better than the blaster, or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like just imagine it however you want. It doesn't matter. But I like the idea of this game because it's like the system isn't built on the premise that you're going to do advance by heroically overcoming challenges. It's like maybe you want to play a game where like you're just high school kids drama, or or like Tales from the Loop, where it's just like the premise of the game is like, no adults will believe you, you're not going to die, and there's just like weird stuff going on in your town or whatever, and it's the same system and you understand how it works, and it's not designed to steer the players into doing one thing or the other. It's just like, hey, here's what's going on in this scene. What do you do? Like, how would you react to that? It's like, if it's a fantasy game, it's like, I would take it with my sword. If it's a high school drama, it's like, I'm going to hide behind the locker because the bully's walking nearby or whatever.
Yeah. So weird to me. But people like what they like.
Well, you just, like I said, I mean, when they build it around sort of like that entertainment thing, and like streaming sort of reaching that thing too, where it's like, you're just making a show.
Yeah.
Like, and like, even when we play offline, even, you too, like when we played our Nerd game offline, it's still like that. I mean, we do a lot of talking to each other, and, most of the time, like, you remember, like, those conversations we had, not like, we heroically overcame that monster and the dice were in our favor. It's like,
I just think it's funny because you could, like, play a game based on high school cliques and cliches with this system, and there's other systems I believe that do it as well.
Yeah.
And that's just weird to me. It's just
sure.
I don't know. Coming from a D&D background and more action oriented, maybe a little more testosterone fueled.
It's like, I could totally, like we were playing Maximum Apocalypse. It's like, this isn't D&D, Dave. Like, you shouldn't just run in the room with all the demons and start shooting your gun because you're gonna get killed. It's like, it's Resident Evil, man. You gotta pick your battles. Like, it's
Sometimes even in D&D that doesn't work out. I know. I am just an agitated player, and I just like things to happen. If there's nothing happening, I get bored. So, or when everyone spends like an hour talking about what they're going to do, but no one is actually doing anything, that's when I'm going to be like, I'm going to open that door over there. So,
yeah. Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. I like to discuss things, but I also just like to move things along, and I don't like to, openly speak my thoughts. Like when we were playing the other day, and you were, it was just like, should we track down this bird's owner or do this? It's like, yeah, just do it, man. Like, if the character wants to do it, it's something to do. Let's go for it. Why not? I don't. That's not my bag. I am amazed that it is a half hour in. We haven't talked about what I'm imbibing. We have several questions from different places, despite the lack of viewership and the thing. But hey, for those people watching, you're awesome. We get to
So,
show them in the chat.
so what are your questions from places?
All right, we got one from Eoromili on Patreon. This is a question for discussion. Mind flayers in their world have turned some important NPCs in a city into thralls, specifically the ones still intact but fanatical loyalty, like from Vola. I'm not sure what that means. How would you build encounters and adventures for players to identify them?
Huh. Well, so he'd asked that question in a message as well.
Yeah, that's where I got it from.
Oh, yeah. So I took that and put it on our sheet for videos to do as a GM 911.
My bad. All right, well, you want to save it for that?
Yeah, because that's a lot more specific. But Zip Warlock
you
had
hang
one.
on, EO Romilli. We will get you. You got his pulled up?
Yeah, so
Right, lay it on me.
we're going to Icewind Dale, the new game book, on top of Theros Wildmount. Do you think there's going to be any love shown to Dragonlance in 5e, or has it somehow become toxic? Well, when you look at Theros and Wildmount, like Wildmount's a no-brainer. Like, Critical Role just prints money. So to not, so doing something with them is kind of like, yeah. And clearly there's people that want that. There's a lot of people that want that. Like, what is it, like 30,000 people tune in live to watch them? So they care what's in those books. Theros, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, let's face it, Magic the Gathering is a huge crowd. They're trying to get some of that in there. So they're getting some new content. Icewind Dale is kind of cool because you know what? We've gotten a jungle adventure, we've got an aquatic adventure, now we're going to get an Arctic horror adventure. So that's kind of interesting. But the question is, really, are they avoiding Dragonlance and some of these older properties, intentionally for some reason or another? I want to say Dragonlance is very generic fantasy, and like they've got that covered in Forgotten Realms. While people love those stories and grew up with those characters, I really think that it's a minority, and many times I'm just like, why don't you just play that game if you want to play, right? Like, I understand that they want, they want to have a connection with other players, for Wizards to put out the official thing, and people will want to play it. Maybe you don't have a home group, so you're just hoping beyond hope that you'll be able to roll up at your Adventures League game, and boom, there it is. You're gonna have to deal with Tahikis and Dragon High Lords, But I just feel like they've been holding back on Dragonlance because maybe they don't think it's exciting enough a setting.
I don't even think it's that involved. I don't think it's like a deep decision for them or anything. I mean, I'm sure part of it just tied up in like licensing, right? I mean, it's not...
that could very well be a thing too. Who even owns Dragonlance?
But even beside that, it's like, why don't they? It's like because they want to make exciting new stuff, and those things exist. I mean, they planted their flag in the Forgotten Realms, which is fine. I mean, it's like it's obviously incredibly popular and well known and super developed, right?
Go Ed Greenwood, woo!
Yeah. And so, like, to your point, like you were saying, it's like, I mean, other than a few minor variations, like, what's the difference? I mean, most of the adventures, like, you could just play them there, and it's like, I don't know, throw some Bozak in there every now and again instead of whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of really Dragonlance-specific things. Like, okay, you've got
They're creators, too. It's like, you want to make new stuff.
Yeah, you got your Seafaring Raider Minotaurs and Draconians. Like, Eberron brought a lot to D&D. Like, that you get the Artificer, you get Warforged, Shifters, Changelings, the Lightning Rouse. There's so many aspects that aren't really in traditional D&D that Eberron has. So, like, that one kind of makes sense to pull that forward, to pull them into the game.
Yeah, right.
I feel like, when they decided to do Ravenloft, they're like, well, yeah, Ravenloft, not only is it a classic, but it's also, like, the classic horror trope as well. So, if you wanted to bring that into the game, that's, like, one of the best ways to do it.
I mean, isn't, like, the original 2-book adventure campaign basically just Dragonlance reflavored? I mean, just call them Dragon High Lords instead of Dragon Cultists.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
there's an orb of dragonkind in the DMG. I mean, I'm not trying to like poop on Dragon. I love it. I mean, I'm a huge Dragonlance fan, and
it was like the first books I read were all Dragonlance, and they were great.
Right.
But I wouldn't be super excited to play Dragonlance. I don't think that world is going to offer any super new or interesting experiences I couldn't have in another world.
I'll tell you. Well, I guess to play devil's advocate though, for my own self too, like, you know, in thinking of how I've been kind of like parceling out, you know, like Theros and stuff and all those things in my mind, because believe me, keeping up with thinking of new ways to talk about D&D based on the videos is like, woo, that is hard. But you know, when I was really thinking about that Theros book, I'm like, well, part of the discussion and the maybe I don't want to say risk, but something to consider, right? From a design standpoint and a consumer standpoint, is like when they make these new things. Theros is a great example. It's meant. I don't want to say it's meant to be. It's meant to be used however you want. It's presented as like, this is what adventuring in this world is like, right? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking it actually would be I wouldn't mind seeing even more of that. Like, you know how we notice like, oh, all these Forgotten Realms books has a section on races, like these are the races that live in this world. And so it's kind of weird when people are like, well, you know, Leonin are better than Tabaxi, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, they don't live there. I mean, maybe they are. Yeah, it's not part of that world. So I think it would be neat if these books included like a more expanded form of that, kind of like what I was doing on the website of like, well, here's like not the only, you know, subclasses and stuff in this world, but like these are the ones that make sense here. Like here's how you would flavor those here. So I could see doing something like that with Dragonlance, and of course, I mean, just having like maps and lore. I mean, people love that stuff. That's made me get off on this tangent is, you know, so a lot of that appeal is lost on people like you and me because we generally don't play in those worlds. So I could see the appeal for people that do, you know, use all that stuff to have all that stuff.
I almost
like 5e-ized.
I almost feel like that viewpoint, that argument point or discussion point or topic actually speaks to why they haven't done Dragonlance. Because there's not a whole lot of that would be really different than playing in any other world.
Right.
You know,
I actually lost that was the point I was.
Okay.
Was just like there wouldn't be that much different, you know, like. But
you could totally lift from whatever it would say for Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk and drop it in Dragonlance and just change the names and faces and it would be the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the big difference? We have Kender. And we don't have orcs. Like that would be
Draconians.
It. Yeah.
But if they did do 5e, you know, also there would be a little bit of be careful what you wish for, because it's like, well, they'd probably update it in terms of like the lore's own timeline, because like, well, we already did the War of the Dragons, they're not just going to do that again, right?
Yeah, they'd have to do something different.
You know, here's what's like the aftermath of that. So, I mean,
well, there's a lot that's happened, because I mean there was a lot of novels that came out after that.
That's true too.
Yeah, so that would make it a lot different, and I don't know that we're going to see. I feel like we're going to see like Spelljammer and Planescape and Dark Sun, that kind of stuff, way before we see a Dragonlance.
Yeah, because like you were saying about Icewind Dale and all the other adventures, they're also all, you know, have chunks that are expand. You know, it's a great point during that press briefing. I had asked about like, you know, exploration rules and stuff, right? And Jeremy had said, oh, well, we're building out what's in the DMG about extreme cold and altitude and all that stuff. And that's what all these books do, right? It's like, Out of the Abyss, it's like, what's the Underdark like? Well, there's some stuff about vision and light, and it's like, and this adventure also has a lot more for that kind of stuff. And so like, you know, something like Spelljammer or Dark Sun, it's like desert survival, travel between the planes. I mean, Dragonlance is just a temperate Earth-like world. So there's, it's got like Arctic regions and stuff like that, but.
And also, it'd have to be a, more likely it's going to be a setting book and not an adventure.
Oh, it would have an adventure in it.
Oh yeah, it would have an adventure
yeah,
in it, but it'd
it would
be a
be
setting
more like
book.
that model, right? It would probably have like a first level adventure, and then there would be a slew of DM skilled stuff to support that as well. So that would be cool.
And also, you know what? There may even be surveys where they ask about the different worlds, and like the ones that you're looking for might have just ranked really low, and they're going to go with the ones that get higher interest levels.
Well, here's an interesting point too. Of like, I was thinking when you said people that grew up with those stories and really connected with those characters, just want to share that with other people. I totally get that, but if you think about like parallels, it's like, okay, well, Dragonlance was that thing of the 80s. It's like, oh, these books, and we love the characters, and now we have material in that world. That is what like Wildman is and stuff, right? It's like that's the media based on the game you love, and now there's game stuff to support that. So it's just fresh stuff. I mean, like I said, they've already tread those things.
So Hector King. So what's y'all's favorite setting other than fantasy?
It's a toss-up between sci-fi and then just like, well, setting or genre. Yeah, I guess that's sort of motivating. Well, I guess I'd say sci-fi then.
Yeah, I think they're asking basically genre. And I mean, so also...
Two different things. You could have a swashbuckling space. Look at Star Trek and Star Wars. Those are both same setting, different genre. They're both set in space with laser guns and stuff. So setting, I don't know. I kind of like modern day stuff, but sci-fi is fun.
Yeah,
I like other planets, and I like sci-fi, and especially like interplanetary stuff because it's funny. It's fun to like think about alien species relating to our own experiences in an alien way. Does that make sense? Like aliens got same trubs whether you're from Saturn or Earth. You know what I mean? So that, I guess that was what I would say. Like interplanetary sci-fi action.
So I want to do. I kind of would like to do some occult steampunk, which is
steampunk.
which is kind of fun. I
don't. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Some Gaslight, kind of error, but with so you have like some technology, but not a lot. But you still have mysticism and magic and monsters. So that stuff has been fun to read.
Mm-hmm. I guess I don't know if this is a faux pas to say. It's like I guess I just don't really like steampunk that much. It's like that just doesn't appeal. The aesthetic is, I mean, it's cool, but it's not like, ooh, I love it and stuff. Like occult stuff's cool, but not into the.
Well, that's fine. I mean, each to their own.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure.
You can have any wrong opinion you want, man. I support that. I guess like the thing that drove me towards steampunk was like I had like digested so much fantasy for so long that I just went on a binge of being like anything but fantasy for a while. But I still like the supernatural and the occult elements.
You know what? I'll tell you. Actually, what I really liked, I liked that survival. That Maximum Apocalypse game, I really enjoy that kind of genre or setting, where like it actually helped me play the game. I felt like because just I've watched so many like Walking Dead and like all that kind of Mad Max and Resident Evil and stuff. It's like it does help to like put yourself in that mindset. I swear to God, we would never have found that van if I hadn't been like really thinking. I was like, if it's a mall stairwell, there's probably another set going down to a garage, because we were just going to walk right out into like a horde of robots, and he's like, yeah, there is a downstairs. I was like, yeah, I knew it.
Yeah,
making that plastic bottle suppressor and stuff. I like that kind of stuff. I like skinning your teeth, like scavenging for stuff that's like it you can survive just long enough to find the next stuff that'll let you survive. That was fun. I like that.
Well, I feel like Cortex would lend itself to that a lot. A lot of the stuff in there would work.
Boy, that's interesting. Hector King, Blade Runner mixed with Call of Cthulhu. So that's sort of like the opposite. I'm sure there's stuff out there like that, but a futuristic occult experience seems.
Cthulhu Tech, I think it's called. There's something similar.
I'm one of those people that's like, if your Cthulhu game doesn't end with everybody dead or insane,
did you even really Cthulhu?
Speaking of it, I don't know if this is a tangent or whatever, but have you seen or heard of the movie Underwater?
I don't know that I have.
Prime and stuff. I thought it was just a disaster movie, which I like that kind of stuff too. That'd be fun to play like a disaster movie where like everything's just going wrong, sort of thing. Turns out, this isn't a spoiler. I guess it's in the trailer. I didn't see it. I thought it was cool, but it's like a Cthulhu movie. Like I thought it was because they're like an underwater research base and there's like an earthquake and they there's things falling apart. But it's because there's like literally Cthulhu comes out of this pit. Like you don't see it until the end.
When is that? Damn. When did that movie come out?
It's actually I think it's a movie from like several years ago that Disney just didn't release, and then they just kind of like dumped it in poopy January last year because like January is usually like just put the crappy movies out then, and it was like really good. I mean, it's like really well made and filmed, and it's like a good story. It's pretty cool. And I was like, damn, this would be a great sort of like one-shotter or even several adventures to run and don't tell the players that like, yeah, we're gonna play like your underwater researchers or something, and it's like a disaster zone. That sounds fun. And as they go on, and like, whoa.
So there's a game that was released called Cthulhu Tech. Okay. Now I think it's futuristic, and they start like using like the Cthulhu realm as an energy source or something. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's something that came out a few years ago, 2007. So yeah, I think there is something like that out there.
Hey, it was a long chain of thoughts that led me back to this, but to go back to Cortex Prime again. Another thing that I like about systems like this, and I don't have a ton of experience with them, but I kind of do, and just from reading it, is like, I like that when there's not just straight up pass-fail, or like success-fail sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And like, that's sort of what dice pools lend themselves to, right? And a lot of other games, because, I mean, I gotta tell you, man, as much as I love D&D, it's like, it just sucks when you're the DM, or the, I guess, if I feel empathy for players, or when you're the player, when your turn comes around and you just like miss, or the spell fails or whatever, it's like, you wait and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and then it's just like, nope, my turn was totally useless, like didn't do anything. So I like that idea of like, well, there's always something's gonna, like you're gonna change you're gonna change the status of the scenario no matter what, and then the next round everybody can just deal with those changed circumstances, but it's not just like you just completely.
And the idea of that you can also succeed and have like hiccups that happen as well is kind of fun and interesting.
Points and stuff like that.
There can be.
Yeah, I suppose there could be, but yeah, that's one.
It's one of the mods.
Oh, is it? Okay. So yeah, basically it's just like you get taken out of the scene, and it's sort of like a built-in like risk or reward thing, right? Because it's like if you make a contest and you fail, I think don't quote me on this, but you get like a chance. It's like, well, I'm going to try again to beat it.
So
Like, if you beat it, then it's like, oh, it's like you get a plot point or something. But if you fail, then it's like you have to like give in, or you get taken out of the scene or something.
There's things that take you out of the scene, but there are also things that take you out of the game.
Oh, is there?
Yes, later on.
Well, I guess are those things like lethal mods? It's like, hey, if you want your game to be
no, it's just part of the game.
Oh.
So, I think there's like some stress mods, and depending on
that's what they're called. Yeah,
is where you get
that's
that.
What I love about it. It's like, well, if you just want to have a game where like everybody plays cute furry animals like traipsing through the forest, like just don't use that mod.
Yeah, There's definitely a lot of that where you can build the kind of game you want to play.
Yeah, I like that.
I would definitely have ways. I would definitely build ways where people can probably be offed. I don't know. It's just too far removed from my play style to be like, there are no really, really bad consequences.
Well, let me ask you this. I don't want to get too off tangent, but what is your play style? Just you just like to constantly be doing something, right?
Yeah. So engaged. I like to be. I mean,
like you said, you don't like when people talk too much. I mean, they're engaged with each other. You don't engage with them, so you do that.
No, so role playing is cool, but so there becomes a point where it's not just that; it's just just being so tedious trying to come up with the perfect plan, and it doesn't feel like you're really doing anything.
Especially since it's haven't you played enough D&D where look, no matter what you do, something is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like for instance, when we were playing that Espers game and we were at the river, at the very, very beginning, you'd be maybe we could throw a grappling hook with a rope, or we could do this, we could make a makeshift bridge. It's just go in the water, whatever. I mean, we got to get to the other side. Let's just go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's some pre-planning, but yeah, I've certainly been in sessions where it's
But then we learned that our DM is that player, does probably play that way more so. Because it's we should have, figured out how the tieflings get across.
Well, in that sense, then I think, that I really think you might, I hope I'm right, and I do too, and I think we might enjoy Cortex because it is sort of designed around just progressing things forward. So, let's say everybody was talking or whatever about a situation and you were well, I'm going to have my character just do this. It's not the game moves into another phase then, you have caused everybody. It's well, now we got to roll initiative and do all this stuff. It's okay, well, if nothing's opposing your character from doing that, just do it. I mean, it just straight up says that. It's if there's no opposition, then don't roll. It just happens, right? And if there is some opposition, then you can make your roll, and then the status of what's going on will change, and then everybody can react to that. But it's not you're gonna. I guess it's not you're going to trigger some event that causes everybody to die.
Hopefully.
People, for instance, it could be a mod or maybe some more stuff further in, but it's I didn't see anything about movement speed and all that stuff. So it's if you were I'm going to charge in there and Leroy Jenkins it, and everybody's I'm going to run away. It wouldn't be well, you can move 30 feet on your run, and just be okay, well, it'll be challenging for you to run away, and if you succeed, you just ran away.
The way that game works, it absolutely would be an abstraction. It's okay, make a speed check, whatever. Whatever attribute would work for speed in that game.
So you gotta, I'm gonna roll 2d10 for your opposition roll. Yeah.
Well, that's the interesting.
If you beat it, you just did it.
That's the interesting thing too about the dice system and the pools is because you use d4s up to d12s. There's ways to step your dice up, which is actually in some ways more beneficial than getting more dice in your pool.
Yeah, I liked that. There was little nuances like that. Maybe you want to say, or the great example is there's that effect die, right?
Yes.
And it's so it was a pool, and they rolled a d12, 2 d8s, and a d4, and the d12 was only a 1 on the die, and the 2 8s were 5 and 6 or something. So it's well, they're gonna choose the effect die as the biggest die, but the result wasn't the same, so you save that for the effect die. Because it doesn't matter what the 1 is, it's just the die is a d12. So I like that kind of a little bit of nuance where you can I'm going to save this one for this, and these will be my action die or whatever.
Well, so one of the cool things that I read that was kind of interesting was so you can get assets, right? And they can step dies up for you, or they can add to your pool. And they use.
Can I take 1 second to make a quick announcement?
You can make the announcement.
I totally forgot, and I just remembered. So Nerdicus Ted's fan game is this Sunday. It's coming Sunday, and he is in need of more players. So if anybody's in the chat or watching this in the next few days.
Yep, I believe he's playing at 8 p.m. and it is a 5th level game.
Of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So if you would like to play with Nerdicus Ted, email him ted@nerdarchy.com. Put something like Nerdarchy fan game or something in the subject so he notices.
Yep, he's going to be choosing 2 players so you can jump in on that.
Yeah.
So they use the example of, you're like, hey, you're in a fight with somebody and there's a crowbar there, you want to pick it up and hit them with it. Mm-hmm. So that could give you an asset if you use your Benny, right? You spend your point, right? Your power point to do it. But they're like, well, they use that example, but they're like, well, why wouldn't that affect you normally? And they're like, well, because you're always picking up the crowbar, you're always doing whatever it takes to win the fight. But by spending the benefit and increasing your pool or stepping up a die, what you're saying is that this crowbar at this time actually narratively means more in the story.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good way of presenting that. Yeah.
It's not just that it's a crowbar and you can use it to fight.
You know what I like about that a lot is, in a broader sense, is like it sort of really solves that like hit points are abstraction thing by like just stating what they mean by an abstraction. Like, a lot of the things that people will say to explain hit points, like, well, it represents this. That's just their interpretation. This is like in the rules, just says that. Like, yeah, you're always trying to do the thing. You're always trying to hit him in the eye, get the headshot, disable him quickly. I mean, of course.
Yeah, I'm going for the jugular. Yeah, that's what happens when you get that final hit in and they die. You got the jugular. Everything.
Like a boxer saying, like, what's your strategy? I'm going to go out there and knock him out. Like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. That's what you're trying to do.
But that doesn't actually happen until the final blow, the final knockout shot. Owen Casey Stevens wrote a great article a couple years ago. You're always going for the eyes, which is basically that. It's like, you say you're going for the eyes, and they notice what you're doing, and they protect their eyes. It's only at the end when you finally deplete all their hit points that you actually maybe got the eyes.
I think it's just an unfortunate result of them being called hit points.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the other problem with it from the player side.
Oh, by the way, espresso and cream.
Espresso and
cream. You're welcome, world.
Yeah, they're wondering.
I think I saw it on Reddit. It was like the front page of the news of the internet.
what was Nerd or Doug drinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So narratively and mechanically, the problems with that is like anything that you can do as a player, then why wouldn't everybody else do? And it becomes problematic in the game because as a party. You only got 8 to 10 eyes. If everyone goes for the eyes, eventually the party's going to be blind and they won't have any eyes.
Mm-hmm. Or hands or
whatever, yeah.
Yeah. Even it's the same thing with like disarming and so. And I hesitate, to say because like, well, there's things like disarming strike and which is explicitly doing it. And as third-party creators, it's like we make up crunchy stuff that we would advise people to flavor all the time. So take that with a grain of salt.
Well, that stuff's in there. It's just not as presented. It's not as useful. It's like there's rules for disarming.
Like you're always trying to do the best thing. It's like if the guy, if you're fighting a master swordsman, of course you're trying to disarm them when you're fighting. Or whatever. If it's a heavily armored guy, then people are like, I want to cut the straps of his armor. It's like, oh, okay.
No one's ever thought of that.
Yeah. I'll tell you where D&D and games like that do sort of break down is, mechanically is like when you start getting, and this is probably why like high level adventures are, get tough to create and run. Is like, well, it gets to the point where like it's tough to imagine a world and scenarios that would really be that challenging for basically superheroes. It's just like that same, wooden door. It's like just because the lock DC is higher, it's like I could just disintegrate the door. I can fly over the door. I can just walk right through the wall and you know what I mean? So I don't know what made me think of that, but it just becomes more challenging at higher levels.
Well, it is weird, like when you think about the things that the players have to overcome and face, and like if they're unique in the world, what the hell is the rest of the world doing?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Yeah, they're just getting eaten by monsters left and right. It's all they can do. But with that, it's that time again where we have to wrap things up. Yeah. But we'll be back tomorrow night for same time for a game of Those Bastards, run by Megan R. Miller. Don't forget the
I'm
R.
really enjoying that game.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So with that, until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy. That was on point.